Hello everyone, welcome back to Ukrainian Media Podcast Conversation which help us make sense of the present by understanding the past. I am Olena Solodovnikova and today I'm excited to be joined by Professor Jason Stanley. Hello Jason.
Hello.
Uh, let's proceed to the first topic. In your book, How Fascism Works, you pointed out the red flags in Trump policies that were noticeable approximately at least 8 years ago. Now you have left the United States, but not at least at all, I think so. But you do understand that country have authoritarian policies which didn't suit you. Could you have imagined during Trump's first term that would happen to American values today, and how could that happen? Is Trump alone responsible for that, or all American society have to be in charge for that?
Yeah, so uh uh he was elected, he was elected twice. It's obvious to anyone that he's not going to leave power. Uh like he's going to stay in office until he dies, whenever that is. And then something else will happen. And when he ran the second time, he wasn't hiding that. He's already talking about Trump 2028. Uh, Obviously didn't want to leave power the first time, and now that he has all the structures of power, he's not going to leave. And obviously, I don't need to tell Eastern Europeans this because you have it all around in your neighborhood. So the United States is joining Belarus, Russia. Uh, it's familiar. Uh, I think the important thing for Eastern Europe is to recognize that the United States is not special. Ukraine is special. uh, so you have to deal, some autocrats will help Ukraine and other autocrats won't help Ukraine. So depending upon what their interests are. So the United States, it's a big country. There are going to be states that resist, like as we see in a country like India. Modi has autocratic tendencies. Certainly, journalists are getting facing incredible pressure, being facing pressure from the courts, violent threats in India. But because India is such a large country and has states that resist, it's Modi is not able to take over the whole country. So we have here in the United States an attack on the democratic institutions, the universities. Today, the Trump administration said that all international student visas will be suspended until they come out with some new policy. So there are no international students welcome in the United States anymore. So each day brings with it these dramatic new changes. And I think Ukraine has seen this with its neighbor Russia. Uh, it took years, right, for Russia for journalists to start being killed and imprisoned. And we're not there yet in the United States, but we're certainly a lot closer to there than we were 4 months ago.
Yes, probably 2 days ago, I just wanted to ask you about why Trump became the Putin ally. But now the situation is controversial, and I ask you, what is going on with Trump now with his statements about Ukraine's situation?
I mean, I don't think Trump is going to give more military assistance to Ukraine. But Trump ran on a lot of promises. His promise to end the genocide in Gaza and the war crimes that Russia is committing in Ukraine. He ran on those promises, and some people actually believed him. But it didn't work. The war in Ukraine didn't, the Russians were not stopped within 24 hours in Ukraine. The genocide in Gaza has gotten worse. So he obviously doesn't have the power he thought he had over Putin and Netanyahu. So how is he going to react to that is the question. Uh, I think he himself is probably surprised. I'm just guessing here. But, I don't think Putin and Netanyahu look like they care much, do they? What Trump thinks. So I don't know what power he has over Putin and Netanyahu. They seem to be just continuing what they were doing before. So these two conflicts that he promised to stop immediately have gotten worse. Uh, so what can Trump do? I don't think he's gonna, again, as I said, he's never said he's going to continue funding for Ukraine. So we're gonna have to see Germany and other EU countries step up and replace that support.
What is the thinking way of Trump? Is it about profitable and business thinking, and or the question is, and is it broader issue here that he and Putin the same, the both dictators?
Yeah.
No.
So this is very familiar from history that fascist dictators see each other as allies until they aren't. Until they're like, "Oh, you're not going to do what I say." And then they recognize that they don't have the same interests. So I think so Putin, as everyone in Ukraine knows, is not trustworthy. He's going to continue to attack Ukraine until he can conquer all of Ukraine. Uh, and Trump thought, okay, Putin wants to enrich himself. I want to enrich myself. We're going to work together. I want to be Putin of America. Uh, but it doesn't turn out that way because it turns out that different dictators have different agendas. So now Trump is running into the reality that the rest of the world knows about Vladimir Putin, that Vladimir Putin is going to do what he's going to do, and anything he's going to tell you is a lie otherwise. So now my suspicion is Trump will be like, okay, we're done with that. They go do everything on their own, and then use that as a reason to dominate his sphere of influence. So one reading of what's going on is Trump is saying, okay, China can do whatever they want, Russia can do whatever they want, and we're going to do whatever we want. Um, so that's, I think, something like that is the situation. Trump wanted to be involved in brokering peace in Israel and Gaza and brokering peace between Russia and Ukraine. Now he sees the reality of Putin and Netanyahu, and you know, uh, he'll probably lose interest.
But what is about his statement that Putin is crazy? That was very bold statement to say Putin
Oh,
is directly.
no, he'll take. I mean, that's like saying. I mean, tomorrow he'll say he's not crazy.
Okay, yes, that
Yeah.
is changes of his mood. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's he's even more mercurial than Putin. Uh so he hasn't said he's going to do anything about the fact that he's just shocked that Putin lied to him.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, he
Yeah.
thought that, they're going to be buddies and, Putin was going to be, and it kind of looks like they're buddies because he's doing what Putin wants. He's destroying the United States. So, uh, you couldn't have a more, uh, you know, if Putin himself was running the United States in order to destroy it, he would do what Trump is doing. So, uh, the whole idea is to make them, but I think you see now that the idea with both autocrats is to show people democracy, is to attack democracy.
Yes, unfortunately. I wanted to ask a few questions about education. You say that nowadays American education is becoming just about acquiring skills. is that fact that students are not being taught to think freely means a deliberate sabotage in order to have uneducated voters who are easily manipulated and impose some populist ideas of them.
Yeah, education, as we know, as Vladimir Putin said, wars are won by teachers. So all we have to do is look at the textbooks in the occupied territories of Ukraine to see how important education is to an autocratic takeover. Russia's textbooks represent Russia as innocent. They erase Ukrainian identity. Um, they they're the idea is there are only Russians, and there's no Holodomor is erased, and you see somewhat similar things in the United States in the textbooks that in the they explicitly say they want to impose patriotic education. You know, what country imposes patriotic education? I mean, the idea is the purpose of the education system is to get you to worship the country. That's not, to end criticism. Imagine ending criticism in Ukraine. You guys criticize each other all the time. Uh, so, uh, uh, that's what they're trying to do in the United States is just have this kind of patriotic education, that kind of makes people just salute the flag. And I assume at some point schools will have pictures of Donald Trump on the wall. And,
Oh.
uh, you know, the standard story that one of the things that disappoints me, if I have to be honest, is that we're not doing authoritarianism in any new or cool way.
Yeah, but about the patriotic education, now in Ukraine, we are talking about that we need to be patriots. We need to talk with people, with young people about patriotism. What we will need to do in this situation with patriotic education?
Well,
Uh,
you're at war right now.
yeah.
So it's a more complicated situation. This is the big struggle of Ukraine. After you win the war, you can't become a nationalist authoritarian country. So, during times of war, you need nationalism, and as soon as the war ends, you need to stop the nationalism.
Okay.
I go to Ukraine and support Ukraine because it represents democracy and freedom. I'm not interested in your dances or whatever. I don't speak Ukrainian. I'm not Timothy Snyder. I'm not there because you have certain dances and wear certain clothing. I'm there because you complain about your leaders and you don't want to be like Belarus and Russia, because of the revolution of dignity, because of what the Ukrainian people have shown the world. Great Ukrainians today, the Naims, Mustafa Naim, uh, Amasi Naim, these are not ethnic, they're not blonde
The
people, but
Afghanian originally.
yeah, and everyone loves them because they're patriotic Ukrainians. And Ukraine doesn't stand for have it blood and soil. It doesn't stand for that lost. Zelensky is a Ukrainian Jew, but Zelensky walks around the world representing Ukraine, which is actually one of the capitals of Jewish life in world history. So Ukraine, you know, there's different ways Ukraine can go. Ukraine can say, okay, we're going to forget about the fact that a Jewish leader led us through this war, and we're going to say you have to wear certain clothing, and you have to be from the countryside, and you have to be Ukrainian Orthodox in order to be Ukrainian. Or Ukrainians can say we fought off an evil dictator in the name of democracy and freedom, and Ukraine stands for those values. So that's going to be a struggle. It's going to be a struggle, but in fact, whatever Vladimir Putin says, Ukraine voted, the Ukrainian far right got less support in 2019 than the far right gets anywhere else in the world. So, so there's a lot of hope for Ukraine. Obviously, in a nationalist moment, in a war, there's going to be nationalism. But I think you guys don't like politicians, and that's very helpful because you're fighting this war so you can replace your leaders with elections.
So you hint that Zelensky wouldn't be re-elected the next time. Is
Maybe,
what?
maybe not.
Could
It,
it
it, it you
could
know,
it be bad for our democracy? Uh,
it's all for Ukrainians to decide. And that's the great thing about democracy, right? It's all Zelensky will go down in history as a great Ukrainian no matter what. You know, uh, uh, he is your wartime leader right now. And what that means is Ukraine is a multicultural democracy, but that doesn't mean that you have to keep him around, you know. But in human history, Zelensky is a hero. But does he have faults? Well, democracy means that you realize that everyone is a human being and everyone has faults. Sometimes you need to change leaders. Human leaders can become mad with their own power. That could happen. I'm not saying that's happening with Zelensky. But you know what? Here's the great thing. You will all decide.
Yeah, I think so. Back to the education question. In general, what kind of education is required in future, given the active influence of artificial intellect in our brains? For example, children today, especially my daughter, write and communicate little in verbal messages and get the knowledge from the YouTube and TikTok. What could this lead to? How education, which is taught at ideal universities, should look like in the future?
Well, I've switched to written exams for all my classes because I don't want my students using Chat GPT. So it's very sad because I mean, I love to grade essays and I love to meet with students about their essays. But even if they're not having Chat GPT write their essays, students are having them help write their essays. And so you're really losing something. But the thing with technology is that it's its own thing that changes our habits and practices. So the car, think of the car. The car changed humanity. We couldn't have predicted how it would change humanity. We couldn't have predicted it would destroy the world, the environment. We couldn't have predicted you could jump in a car and visit someone quickly. Nobody knew what the car would bring, and so we don't know what this technology will bring. No doubt, it will bring radical change, but uh, the nature of that change is not something we're in control of.
So, is it true that now in the American universities you use special blue notes for only writing exams?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's how we used to do it. I'm looking for them. That's how we used to do it, and that's how I'm doing it again. So let me tell you, your daughter better be able to write legibly.
Yes, I will tell you about
Suddenly,
that.
that's important.
We will work on it. Thanks. You describe in great detail in your book various examples that idea of anti-immigrant policies are being more and more accepted by the people originate from the countryside, from the rural. However, in Germany, this immigrant hysteria is now being adopted by the voters from the large cities as well, even the multicultural Berlin, where there are some cases where Germans are starting to blame migrants for their economics problem. How does it work? How people being brainwashed in such a way?
Yeah, wait till they need health care.
Oh,
know, who's going to take care of you when you're 80 years old, 85 years old, and need someone to, I mean, that's work that immigrants have traditionally done. Immigrants come to make a better life for their children, and, they will work in jobs that other people won't work on and work in. And the richer your country gets, the fewer children people have. And so you need young people, and
yeah.
immigrants are so they solve these problems that you just cannot have you cannot solve in a wealthy country in any other way. Hungary is not doing a good job paying people to have kids. So what are you going to do? So maybe that reality will hit, say, Germany soon, but we are talking about European countries with a history of fascism and a history of the dominant group viewing themselves as you know, uh, identical with the nation. That's why it's great to walk down the street with Mustafa Naeem and see him, like, see what he and his brother have done, that family, because nobody questions that they're Ukrainian. That so that uh, I think as we see in Germany, I'm hoping that as we see Germans who have Turkish backgrounds, as we've already seen, attain positions of political power and attain, obviously, the sports, the legendary German football team has Germans who are of Turkish
Yes,
backgrounds.
but Turkish diaspora is very huge in Germany. They have a
Yeah,
special quota
and
here.
absolutely, and they're German. They're German. Recently I was in Berlin and in a taxi, and the taxi driver was complaining about foreigners. And I said,
Yeah.
but the Germany of Turkey, the Germans who are from Turkish backgrounds, I can't imagine Germany without them. He said, I don't mean the Turks. They speak German. They're part of our culture. I mean the Americans. So, because there are so many Americans in Berlin. So, uh, so, so I just think that. I think it's slow, and there are these backlashes, right, uh, to uh, to to immigration. It takes a little while. So now we see much more assimilation of the Turkish population of Germany. Uh, I don't think those people are going to be, I mean, they speak I was lived in Germany in the 1980s, and my friends then who were my age and were of Turkish background are married to are engineers and are married to people who aren't of Turkish backgrounds, and you go to their house and you drink beer or whatever. So, their cultures are mixed. Certainly, they all speak German. You know, uh, so so the emphasizing diversity is very important. For instance, in Ukraine, it's very important, extremely important that all Ukrainian, that it's part of Ukrainian history, that, it's one of the home countries of Judaism. And so, many, many Jewish people come from Ukraine. And so, when I'm in go to synagogue, I people are like, "Wow, my family is from this neighborhood in Kyiv, and have you been there?" And towns I've never heard of, and so that multiculturalism and Germany has to realize that Germany has now multiple religions, like it once did, Islam and Christianity. And basically, most of the people of my generation, whether they're Turkish or German, aren't very religious at all anyway. So I hope that you get these waves of changes, and then there's a reaction to those waves of changes. And in the reaction to those waves of changes, you have a space for a dictator who can say, "Look at the changes. They're threatening our country." And you see this in Eastern Europe with LGBTQ people. So uh, That's who Putin ran against, who he scapegoated, and not immigrants, but LGBTQ Russians. And you have a situation in Ukraine where, my experience in Ukraine was as a result, people are like, oh, he's attacking democracy and he's attacking LGBTQ people. It must be that sexual freedoms are freedom. And so we will defend it. We will have pride parades. We will have, it's not ideal in Ukraine, obviously, for LGBTQ Ukrainians, but they're your soldiers. They're
Found
dying
them,
on
yeah.
the front for their country. And you can see that Vladimir Putin hates them. And so there must be something good about them.
Yeah. You originally have a Polish roots. What are your expectation after the Polish presidential elections?
Well, that was very exciting to see that. I mean, what I liked recently was that the civic platform, that PEAS, Law and Justice, lost. That was utterly essential. I was talking to a Polish reporter after Trump won, and he said the PEAS politicians all clapped in the assembly, in the parliament. And I said, but Trump is allied with Putin. And he said, well, the peace doesn't care about Poland. They care about uh, owning the libs. They care that liberals are unhappy. Progressives, that's all they care about. You know,
Yeah.
that they're crying, and they care more about that than patriotism about their country. So, this global far right movement that vilifies LGBTQ people, that vilifies immigrants, that claims that the identity of the nation is rooted in blood and soil and this group of people who were here, not just the people who are originally from there. For instance, in Ukraine, many Jews are originally from Ukraine. So this kind of far right, Poland hasn't completely defeated it, but we have a lot to. But I think they give the world hope, and the way they gave the world hope is they kept their press free. So so that turns out to be crucial as long as you can keep a free press. I don't follow Polish politics. I mean, I'm German. My father was brought up in Germany. My mother was brought up was is Polish, and she was one of the uh, she was one of the Polish Jews that Stalin brought to the Gulag, and then she returned to Poland when she was 5 in 1945 and did not have a good time. And so she came to America when she was 8. So I'm only recently sort of going to Poland and getting to know the politics and the people. I'm much more involved in German politics. I speak German, I appear on the media there. But now I'm increasingly, it's very powerful for me that I change when I go to Kiev. I teach at the Kiev School of Economics. When I go to my job in Kiev, I change trains in Chelm, where my family is from.
Yeah, great. The last question about Ukraine. You have compared Ukrainian colonial history to colonial oppression in Africa and India. What is the fundamental difference between us?
Uh, It's an interesting question. The question of and Miriam Naim, the sister of
Yeah.
Mustafa and Masi, has been the main theorist of this parallel, right? New York Times had a big article about her. She was my teaching assistant in my class on colonialism. So I've learned a lot and then she's fiercely devoted to this. One of the things that I think I mean, I think there are just obvious parallels. Every colonial situation is different, right? But just like the British tried to erase Kikuyu identity in Kenya, Kenya has 44 tribes or 40 some tribes, and the British tried to just completely erase the identity. And the British tried to set up schools where people graduated not knowing anything about their own history. So that's extremely parallel, right? That the erasure of Ukrainian identity. When I taught this material in Ukraine, in Kyiv, at the Kyiv School of Economics, I think the situation that most resonated with my students was the situation of the Kikuyu in Kenya, because they also had the British set up camps where they tortured people if they showed that they still had the Kikuyu religion. They tortured people if they had Kikuyu identity. So that's very similar to what the Russians are doing. So they're trying to essentially torture people out of Ukrainian identity. So, so now one thing I discovered, um, first of all, I discovered that Ukrainians were less familiar with anti-colonial history than they should be, and had difficulty identifying themselves with um, you know, non-white people, which should change.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Because yes, unfortunately, sometimes people in Ukraine said, yes, it is something embarrassing to compare us with Indian, with African people. But when I started to compare this situation in our countries, that is absolutely same.
exactly, it's absolutely the same.
All about humanity, as you talked about previously.
Yeah, and you know, uh, the African nations generally beat their colonial invaders, so it's a good thing to identify yourself with African nations. Maybe you can beat your colonial invaders. So I mean, the parallels are just, the destruction of identity, the destruction of history. Now, one thing I found the Ukrainians resisting is the idea that, and this is something you have to struggle with Ukrainians, is that, Europe could be bad, you know, because Europe has killed. I mean, this is shocking because, like, Hitler marched through Ukraine and killed millions and millions of people. So, presumably Ukrainians should know that Western Europe has been a source of genocide for a very long time, and Western Europe has a bad reputation in large parts of the world. So, but Ukrainians right now are identifying themselves with Western Europe. So that was hard for them, just the same difficulty as seeing the United States right now as it is, as not like the beacon of freedom. Uh, so, um, so that was difficult. Another thing is like they were like, no, we're not the savages. The Russians are the savages. But
Yeah, yeah, we know. And Russians are interested in the destruction of Ukraine and our ideology, now a genocide during the 100 years or more. What will help Ukrainians to withstand?
uh, well, let me finish the colonialism parallel and then get to
Yeah,
that.
sorry,
So,
sorry for
uh,
interrupting.
So no, that's all right. The the Ukrainians are like, no, we're not. So it's part of colonialism. The colonial group says we're going to civilize the savages. So Ukrainians don't want to be viewed as savages. They're like the Russians are the savages. But that was the same in Africa. You know, obviously the Europeans were behaving like savages in Africa. They were killing, King Leopold killed 10 million Congolese, the Belgians, in a few years, cutting their arms off the little kids for rubber. Who's the savage? Uh, so they would go into a village, and if the village didn't give them the amount of rubber, meet the rubber quota, they would cut the hands off the kids. So I think the Belgians were not the civilized ones in those circumstances. So, but you can actually see Putin saying Ukrainians are savages, because what he's saying is civilization is Christianity and hating LGBTQ people. And so Ukrainians bringing democratic values and freedom are destroying traditional civilization. So you see the exact same structure. And Ukrainians can't really, many Ukrainians, not all Ukrainians, have a hard time seeing that that was the perspective of Africans too. They were like, you're the ones raping and killing, you're the savages. Uh, so, uh, so, And then the Ukrainians are bamboozled and tricked by European history. They don't understand that African nations have long histories too. So yeah. Final point: how do we deal with Russian imperialism and colonialism? We have to see that Ukraine faces something uh, something similar. Uh, and you know, you have to look to the ways of preserving culture. It's not just, it's not just preserving culture. In this case, there's an element where you're preserving democracy. So there's two things to keep in mind at once. There's the destruction of the Ukrainian language and identity, but there's also the destruction of democracy. And both things are at issue here in Ukraine. Whereas that isn't that normal, and that's not always the case in colonial situations. Uh, you know, if you look at what Israel's doing in Gaza, for instance, Gaza, the Hamas is a terrorist group, is a horrific. They're not a democracy. Nevertheless, looks to be interested in destroying Palestinians, representing them as having no history. So, but uh, Ukraine is right now the central center of the democratic struggle. Uh, and, you might lose that struggle. I have no special recipes for how you win that. But Thucydides said that democracies are always stronger in war because in a democracy, people choose to fight.